So much like Christine, I guess I'm interested in the idea of these relics that we leave behind, and I guess around, I don't know how long it's been, around 2006 or something, I started casting childhood toys and putting them into paintings, and then they moved out into the landscape. And actually this is sort of a transitional piece, I believe, for me, because usually the figures are not seen with the artifacts from childhood, but here this one's sort of struggling with it. And the artifacts kind of came about in a way of memorializing childhood, thinking about what's left behind of maybe my own lifetime, and looking at our culture and wondering what will be the contemporary artifacts of our culture after we're gone, and they're not actual ones, they're sort of metaphorical ones of sort of the things that are thought to be important that maybe aren't. And then the sentimentality of childhood and holding on to the past or something like this. So this is actually kind of like I said, a transitional piece, but the figure itself is kind of maybe struggling with the idea of permanence. And why I say it's a transitional piece, that now I'm not using the cast toys. I'm thinking about more of the body and the landscape and removing the objects in the current body of work I'm working on now. So that's, the landscape is a amalgamation of things. It's an Iowa landscape, which I oftentimes use, and those are sort of the landscape of my childhood, I think of it, and those of you that have happened to cross Iowa and Interstate 80, you know there's a lot of flat space, but there's also some rolling hills. This is a little, actually I made a maquette of this Kermit the Frog, and it's a whole sculpture, and this is just the head. So she was supposed to have this sort of awkward sense of almost like, I was talking to someone at the opening, is that sort of awful dream you have as a child where you go to school and you realize you're naked or something weird like that. But just sort of being caught in the middle and sort of fighting the notion of permanence, or of mortality, of we're not going to live forever or something of that nature. So that's what this piece, in retrospect, is about, I guess. Yeah.
How did you start with the Kermit series? I mean, how did that whole thing?
Actually, I was using the Little People, and there are always toys that I had from my childhood, and Kermit was one of the first toys I remember. For some reason I loved Kermit. He was like my best friend. I lived out in the middle of nowhere, and I had two older siblings, and they're 6 and 8 years older. I spent a lot of time by myself, quite honestly, and I remember actually another friend of mine and Kermit, we were both feeding this puppet like beef burgers or something. It was always with me, and I still have it like tucked away in the studio. And kids would tease me about the Kermit. Like I remember very clearly, like in kindergarten, the boys taking it and throwing it up on the hanging light fixtures in elementary school, so I couldn't get it, and it was very like distressing. For some reason, this was my little thing that I've always had with me. You know how people always like or family members start to realize you like frogs, and then all of a sudden they have like an entourage of frogs. Like other people have like teddy bears or something, but there were all these weird frogs, and my grandparents brought me like frogs from Gulf of Mexico stuffed, that were horrific and weird things like that. So anyway, I guess I felt like I needed to introduce this Kermit puppet because obviously it had some sort of real significance to me as that past life as a child. Since I guess I also have decided to omit these things from my work, and because I feel like they have this kind of irony, and this one was kind of fighting that, and it still has it. But that I guess I hope to let go of by not using the cast iconic sculptures, but that's where Kermit came from, yeah.
What's the significance of the high heel shoes?
You know, that's a good question. Now, in retrospect, maybe it didn't need to be. It's like when a body is, you know, nude versus naked, if she didn't have anything on, then she might be nude with this frog head on, but now she feels kind of very naked because she's maybe like has a little bit of clothing on. I guess so it adds to the uncomfortableness of it. I guess that's why I left that. The funny thing is at one point, like this painting, I started it like this, and then when I went to finish it, I was sending it to a show in Seoul, Korea, and for some reason I edited it thinking she looks too naked, and I put like a green bathing suit on her, and then I looked at it a few months later, and I was like, that's just stupid. Like I had to take the bathing suit off because I realized the awkwardness of her just being like naked and kind of weird was I mean, I wanted it to feel uncomfortable, and it is kind of uncomfortable. Yeah.
There's something also, I mean, I think the shoes are actually really important in this painting because the Kermit, you made it white, and so in some ways it's shedding childhood, right? Because she's this sexy woman, but it's also a wedding dress or a debutante dress or something, the way Kermit's neck piece becomes the bottom of the dress, and she's sort of shedding that or rejecting that in some way.
I see it almost like a molting of childhood, and she doesn't fit in that anymore, so it's kind of like struggling with that or something. Yeah.
Well, the whole series that you had done that I think was right prior to this, about similar, same size, maybe a bit smaller, with the female figures that were like fashionable, but then they always have one thing that made you like go, whoa, like the shovel girl.
Yeah.
Like the girl with the shovel.
Right.
And in the same way, I mean, you don't really like see the nudity in this. You know, it's like the head becomes the shovel.
Yeah.
You know, but there's a nice simplicity to it that still makes you, as you said, uncomfortable. Yeah.
Any more questions?
I always am interested in your palette also, the way you get these tones that are very close to each other and almost pastel kind of, very beautiful. Everything's in a middle range and very close. The grays and
I don't have any, I don't know how to answer that exactly.
It is your particular palette though. There's not a lot of contrast in it, but there's a lot of light.
I don't know. It's kind of funny because I look at my paintings and sometimes I see that, and it's kind of, I think we're all, you know, just a product of our environment. And when I was a kid, I hated pastels. And again, like you look on the Iowa landscape and it's like blue skies, and depending on the year, it's either white or snow or green of corn, or you know, things like that. And then what people wear, or at least in the 80s when I was growing up, like all these pastel colors. And I hated pastels, but I think in some ways these things, like, you know, wood grain, they just kind of stick to you. So perhaps it's something of that, you know. And I think when I first started painting, I had a really hard time getting things dark enough. And so I guess they are on the high key side with the, you know, reaching to the darks, but yeah, it kind of takes a while.
You don't do egg tempera?
I don't. They're all oil. Once in a while I'll have like a wash of acrylic, or even, I don't. And I've tried it before. Actually at the academy, we had like a techniques class, and it was nice, but I guess some of the brushes I use even would lend themselves to egg tempera, the sort of hatching, because I tend to use really small brushes and end up kind of drawing with the paint, much like you have to do when you use egg tempera.
You know, Grant Wood was in Iowa.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he wasn't the only American regionalist painter that was in love with the Florentine tempera masters, like Masaccio and those guys. And I think that what Laura was talking about with your palette and how you don't push the color temperature, so you allow everything to just have this soft light. It does remind me a little bit of not just the regionalists, but also the people that they were looking at too.
Whenever I look at Grant Wood, I always think he's looking at German. It's like German descent, and that like more like Holbein or something of that. And I've always been really taken.
Yeah, that too. Yes, it's a similar time period.
And kind of the stiffness of the form, I really love in Grant Wood's. That is also is reflected in those sort of like really kind of almost wooden like figures. That sometimes I think that like painting the human form is just such a difficult thing to give it such life and such fullness. And I think, I struggle with the figure. And I mean, it's kind of funny, like I remember someone asking me when I was right out of grad school, it's like, why the figure? I was like, I don't know, I love it, but I struggle with it, and I keep like starting a different series. I'm like, I'm not going to paint the figure, it's just going to be things in a room, and then all of a sudden there's like a hand or a foot or something, and the hardness of the form, I don't know, I think it's easier to paint like toys and that sort of thing than flesh.
It's interesting because so much of the position of this figure, I mean, just in the hands are just like given in, just giving into the situation and her form, and just, it's desperate, it's uncomfortable, but it's also just kind of just letting go of it all.
The sculptures that you've been doing, because I've seen over the last, let's say, 5 years, you sort of seem to go towards them, but then sometimes you just seem to pull back from using them or making them. What part of your practice do you want to continue to do that? Is it part of the process? Or
it's part of the process, yeah. It's always, there's in some kind of conversation with paintings. It's like, basically, I don't paint well from imagination. So I end up wanting to make something to look at it, just like you were saying, to make it in a 3D modeling program or something like that. I actually, when I was first in art school, I studied, they didn't have a sculpture program. I ended up doing some kind of three-dimensional studies called craft design, and I was making all these like weird wired figurative sculptures with patchworks of everything imaginable kind of sewn onto them. So every once in a while, I guess I came from a family of, borrowing this from a lot of people that use this word, but makers. Like, my mother was always making some kind of thing, whether it's sewing or, craft related, and my grandmother, and my father is a mechanic and a farmer, and he was always making these kind of bizarre things, So when I went to art school, it just kind of, I don't know, I guess I thought painting was like almost too hard or something, which sounds kind of weird. But then I kept painting, and then it was like challenging enough to like, it just it sucks you in. And so it's a back and forth conversation, really. It's just like, they kind of, some things need to come into fruition, and then I work from them. And I'm thinking about a new piece that is a little scary, because sometimes when I think of it, they're far more, I don't know, ephemeral, and that's where I have to like bring them into the world, and then I might paint from that or something.
Because they're beautiful. I mean, the ones that I've seen are really, creepy beautiful. The dystopian sort of thing.
Yeah,
that I've seen, really.
Yeah, like the backpack that I made that's sort of body-like, and I couldn't find anything like that, so I made just a little wax model and then casted it. But yeah, I enjoy it, but there's a point where I get very sick of crafting, like sanding, and like I'm just like, I just want to paint. So yeah, that's why.
I totally get that way with the 3D modeling.
Right.
It's like, I'm in front of the screen doing this, I'm not actually touching or feeling it.
Right, I just want to be done with I think I have to forget that feeling before I am willing to be like excited about making a new object. You know, so yeah, I'm ready to make another object that's coming soon. Okay, any other questions?
You have a pretty consistent landscape, like, and have this, you know, dystopian theme. Like, are you kind of, do you have in mind, like, because there is a narrative of that world that is consistent. Like, is that just kind of happening by accident, or is it something you know, make sure that stays the same? Like,
You know what, when I go on residencies, I guess I collect landscapes, but if I don't get a residency, I can always go to Iowa and paint landscapes. So, and also they're just ingrained in my memory and repertoire. And then of course, like, yeah, I guess to answer your question, you know, it's kind of weird. Like, I always feel like this sense of this dystopia, this like sheer, like, there are all these really horrific things happening in the world, especially when I'm in New York. But then, like, when you go out into middle of America, like, sometimes you don't even really feel it, but you know it's happening or something. Maybe it's just like bringing that with. And there are plenty of strange things happening in you know, these sort of pseudo natural places all over America. It's like they're industrial farms, and you know, small farmer is kind of a fading thing, and it's just kind of yeah, nothing's actually natural. It's very manicured and
it almost has like a Twin Peaks feel to it, you know. So it's weird, but I really dig it.
Yeah, there is a surreal, and you have such a diligence in the way you go after something, and it makes it a little more surreal.
All right. Anything more to add? Any more questions?
Thanks.
Thank you.